Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 28 of spiritual healthcare. It is good to be plugged into everybody this morning, and glad to check in and see what we got on the table today, because we got some really neat topics. Again, some new stuff. I love how we keep branching into things that we haven't talked about before. That's always really exciting. Of course, I've got a new process for you guys to work on, and we're going to be delving into some cool things this morning, including the Amityville horror case. We talked a lot yesterday about mental health care and the paranormal, and Amityville seems like a really good fit, so we're going to talk about that. Good morning, Jason. Good morning, Patricia. It is good to see you guys. We'll wait for some more people to get here. But yeah, we got a great question from Jan yesterday as well about spirit and connecting in with all that is and non-physical and stuff like that. So we'll talk about that, as well as I say, we're going to delve into the Amityville case this morning, because there's lots to learn that we can take away from it. Just as a whole, no matter what your side is, no matter what side you lean towards, whether you believe it was fake or whether you believe it was true story and all of that, we're going to go into all of that. Good morning, Darren. Good morning, Jay. Nice to see you guys. So yeah, it's going to be a really, really interesting spiritual healthcare today, as we start talking about what some of these cases, these famous cases, right, can start to teach us, and what it also says about things like mental health and stuff like that. Also, I think there's a bunch of things, as I say, that we can take away from that. How some of these hauntings end up getting started, and all sorts of a blend of all of the things that we've been chatting about. Good morning, Brandy. Good morning, Shadow. Good morning, Mark. How are you guys? Good to see you all. Yeah, this is going to be a great morning. I hope you guys are doing well. It's very rainy here. I don't know what it is for you guys, but it's very rainy in Edmonton right now, which is kind of nice, actually, because we don't get much rain. We usually either have snow or we have a lot of heat, and there's not really a middle ground. We get 2 seasons in Alberta. We get 2 seasons. That's it. That's all we get. So as I say, lots to chat about today, and I want to get going by talking about Jan's question first. She sent this in the other day, and then we're going to delve into the Amityville case and what that's all about, and where sort of the truth and the fiction all sort of blend together. So we're gonna talk about all of that. But I wanted to talk about Jan's question because it's very much in relationship to things that we've chatted about previously. And she said, I'm reading Ask and It Is Given. Good job, Jan. Such a good book. Such a good book. Do you believe we have spirit guides? And if so, how do we go about meeting or finding out who they are? So, great question. You guys have the greatest questions. I love it. So when we want to delve into things like, connecting with all that is, whatever you feel it is, whether you believe it's God, or, this sort of non-physical intelligence, like whatever your label for it is, it really is about, people think it's about connecting outwards, and it's really not. It's really all about connecting inwards. So in order to gain that connection, the more connection you've got with you, the more still you can be, the more you can find that place of just letting go and surrender, the more you put yourself in a position to start to hear, and I don't mean hear in terms of voices and things like that, but bringing in and allowing whatever that communication is going to look like for you. So sometimes it's things that start to happen, things that you'd normally label as coincidence. And I for one, I don't believe in coincidence. I've seen a little too much now. I don't really believe in coincidence anymore. And just being able to allow for that connection. One thing that some people have done, and it's kind of a cool process, is they sit down with a piece of paper or a journal or something like that, and they get really still within their mind, and they just start writing. And as you're kind of getting into that flow of writing and things like that, suddenly, a lot of people report starting to feel like they're writing down information from somewhere else or something else. Now, I have to preface, any sort of connection or anything like that to non-physical with saying, if you're getting warnings or upsetting messages or anything like that, then that's not non-physical. That's ego. That's a bunch of other things. But if you're getting upsetting messages, you're connecting in with the wrong vibe. So you want to make sure that you're connecting in with something really positive. So make sure you're doing your emotional work. Do your emotional work before you start, meditating and inviting or connecting in. Jan says, "Is this automatic writing?" It is. It can be a form of automatic writing. There's a million different terms for it. Sometimes it can just happen. You'll be journaling about something really good, and something will happen, where you feel like you're just, you're in that flow, you're in that zone, and you can kind of allow that to come forward. I often find that it comes through in emotion, more than anything else, sort of blocks of thought or emotion, and you start to, because I think it's faster, emotion communicates faster than writing. Good morning, Liz. Good morning, Wes. Good morning, Des. Nice to see you guys. And just being able to allow whatever it is, don't pigeonhole it into one thing, that you kind of expect it to show up in a certain way. Don't do that. Just let it flow. But be still and, connect with that part of you that is joy, because that's who you truly are. And when you connect with who you truly are, then you connect with that source, right? So that's what I would recommend in terms of spirit guides and stuff like that. And as I say, some people will say, well, I've got, one that I specifically communicate with. In the case of my great-great-grandfather with Louis Benjamin, they were communicating with a group that called themselves the Humble Ones. So people have reported all sorts of forms of this. Some people feel that it's a loved one, someone they actually knew. So it comes in all different forms. So there's not really a right or wrong way to do it. The big thing is just make sure that your emotional set point is high when you're doing it, because you want to connect in with the higher form of non-physical, right? So that's what you want to do. So great question that came in from Arnold yesterday, and I thought this would be a great topic to tackle this afternoon, because it really does lend into what we were talking about previously yesterday, when we were talking about mental health and how it all kind of blends together and what it starts to look like with psi experiences. And what a great case to bring up, which is the Amityville horror case. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with it. A lot of you guys are familiar with the films, because there's been a couple of films that have come out in regards to this, and the controversy that has gone on in and around the Amityville as well. Good morning, Emily. Nice to see you. Emily, you guys, has a fantastic podcast coming out called Conspiracy. Emily, if you want to throw the link in there or whatever, feel free. I will be a guest on the first episode of her show talking about exorcism, guys. So Emily is an amazing host. She's really cool. So the Amityville case, for those of you guys who aren't familiar with it, it is a really unique story, because it began with a group of murders that happened in a house in the United States, and it was a very interesting, I guess, epic that began this journey that began with this family called the DeFeos, and the son, Ronald DeFeo, ended up murdering all his family members, 6 people, killed them all with a shotgun, middle of the night, ended up running to a local bar, freaking out. Just people were reporting he was completely in hysteria and whatever. And basically he was claiming that or in court anyway, he was claiming that this malicious entity in the house had caused him to murder his family. So anyway, the case ended up going to court, and it was a really interesting trial. He ended up being convicted. But of course, the main phenomenon that everybody is aware of is the family that moved in afterwards, which was the Lutzes, George and Kathy Lutz. So when the Lutzes moved in, nobody really heard too much about what was going on in the house until later, when they all of a sudden, after 30 days of living there, picked up, left all of their stuff. They had 3 days worth of clothes stuffed into bags, and they just took off. They left because they thought, we can't live here anymore. But the controversy started in and around that. Because people began to feel like they were in it for the publicity. Jay Anson, who ended up writing the book, The Amityville Horror, basically, of course, the book sold millions of copies, and it became sort of an idea in the public that, maybe these guys, maybe they were lying, they were trying to make money off of this, and so on and so forth. But what most people don't realize as well is that the lawyer who was defending Ronald DeFeo, he came up with a story, and this is where a lot of the fuel for the hoax bit of the Amityville started, that most people don't realize, is that he came up with a story where he wanted to use that defense to get Ronald DeFeo a lesser sentence. He wanted to appeal that sentence and get him a lesser sentence based on the idea that there was some supernatural influence. And he came forward and said that the Lutzes helped him concoct this story. So immediately there was a huge battle that went on there. It's a big fight because the Lutzes were trying to remain private. There was an article that came out in Good Housekeeping, which the Lutzes then sued over and said, you guys are invading our privacy. We asked you to not discuss this or talk about this. We're done. So there was a lot of chaos, that went on in and around this. And the Lutzes were saying, they had a severely traumatic experience in this 30 days in this house. And, there were all sorts of crazy things going on, and there was a haunting. They were the ones that stayed true to it right from the very beginning of the story right to the end. They said this absolutely happened, and we want to be left alone. Don't talk to us. We want to be left alone. So when the next family moved in after the Lutzes, it added fuel to the fire that maybe this wasn't something that was true, because when they moved in, there was nothing happening. They didn't have anything going on. They had no activity. And they said, these people were making it up. There's nothing to it. So immediately we've got this really complex case, right? Where we've got two people who basically left everything they ever owned behind, dumped everything in order to get out of this house. After 30 days, they were house poor. They had, they got up and left. And then, of course, you had this next family move in and nothing was going on. So where do we start to break this down and divvy this up, right? And from what we know about hauntings, especially negative ones, we have to start looking at a couple of things, right? We have to start looking, one thing in particular is that, are we indeed, if this was indeed true, the Lutzes were telling the truth, and there was this malicious entity that was existing in this house, what put them on the frequency of this haunting, then say, for example, the family that moved in later, why them? Right? So when the kids grew up, when the Lutzes kids grew up, they sort of threw a new loop into the story a little bit, because they came forward and said, this absolutely happened. We don't care what the publisher said. The author, he didn't believe the story at all. He just thought it was a cool story and wanted to make a book out of it. So even he was denying that there was anything. So he turned around and said, no, I don't believe this either. The kids came forward and said, we remember this vividly. The son recounted one incident where he was actually thrown up a set of stairs, that was in the house, and it was really frightening. So he was reporting that, no, this was absolutely true. But here was the thing, and this is what caught my attention with it. The kids did not believe that the house itself was the problem. They didn't. They said, it was our dad. Our dad was the problem. And Danny Lutz was probably the most vocal about it when he came forward and actually said, and finally sort of confessed to everybody, our household was super chaotic. It was super chaotic. And it was not a fun house to live in. And the haunting was not the main problem. The problem was our father. So Danny Lutz actually came out and started to build a bit of a picture for us as to what might have actually caused the activity to begin to escalate and sort of put the family on the frequency of something that might happen. Because we've talked about this before in the past, where what we've seen in terms of investigations is a very specific pattern where people who are hanging around in sort of the chaotic vibration or, that negative emotional state, for whatever reason it is, we get a mirror back, right? We tend to create our reality in terms of how we're feeling and where we are and what we're focusing on, right? So it mirrors back to us all the time, and it mirrors back to us in hauntings as well. So when we start to apply this and we start to understand where the household was, the Lutz household actually was emotionally, we can start to see what was going on. So Danny Lutz basically accused his dad of saying of beating them up. Apparently he was, he said he was very physically abusive, aggressive, yelled and screamed, and the kids were very afraid of him. So with this in mind, if what Danny was saying was true, we can start to see and build a bigger picture about the relationship of what exactly may have attracted this phenomenon into the house itself. So we can start to break down a little bit as to why this family in particular was experiencing all the things that they were. Jay Anson in the film and in the book built up the idea that there was the house was sitting on an Indian burial ground or something like that. That this was a property issue, and somehow this property was violated, and there was an entity that was malicious and whatnot. But Danny Lutz, as I say, tells a very different story. And the kids are very convinced that what was going on was they were getting that reflection back of the chaos that was going on, not only with them, but with their parents too. So we see this a lot, and this is why I love this case as an example of a situation of mental health, because not only are we looking at the DeFeo murders, which he's still in prison. That guy's still sitting there. Ronald DeFeo is still sitting in prison. He got 6 consecutive life sentences, so he ain't getting out anytime too soon. And then, as I say, we move over. We've got a family that comes in, right after the murders, which is a chaotic scene to begin with. They buy this house super cheap, and they move in, and they're sort of sitting on that same emotional level, right? Like they've got, not of course murders or anything like that, but they've got that sort of disrupted, dysfunctional way of being. And it's not long after that, of course, that they start experiencing very much a mirror of what is going on within them. So that's why when I get a case that's, similar, that has the similar dynamics and things like that, we have to start looking at the people. We have to start looking at the family, because when we start to check in with ourselves, when we start to understand that what we are getting back is always going to be reflective of the state of the person, then we can start getting things under control. And it doesn't start with the outside. So when the next family moves in, right? They come in and they look at it and go, there's nothing wrong here. There's literally nothing going on. And the whole thing must have been a hoax. Everybody must have been right, because we don't feel there's any activity at all. So this couple that's moved in, they're, pretty balanced, everyday people. They moved in, they're not experiencing the level of abuse and dysfunction that that the Lutz children were alleging. Or the DeFeo family, for that matter, because whatever caused Ronald DeFeo to murder his family, you obviously have somebody with a very disrupted core at that point. And so there's stuff going on there as well. So you've got this next family that's moving in that's completely in a different emotional place. And of course they move in and don't experience anything. So therefore they believe it must be a hoax. But what we've come to understand when it comes to paranormal phenomenon and what my practice, Teaching the Living, is really about, is exactly this, which is, when you're on that different frequency, when you move into that space and you've got this different frequency going on, you're just not attracting the same thing. You're just not. You're not going to experience the same thing, because you're not within range of that at all. We use the analogy, here all the time, which is, our emotions are radio dial. And when we're tuned into one station, we're not tuned into another. So oftentimes we see this a lot where, a family will move in, they don't experience anything, and immediately discount everything else that anybody else has experienced. We saw this in the Enfield case as well, and where they move in, nothing's going on, and it's totally fine. So when we start to realize that, that emotional center, how we are, how much emotional work we've done, what kind of traumas we've cleaned up, and all of that kind of thing. When we start to realize that whatever we're experiencing is really beginning to reflect on the outside, whether it be in, as I say, financial problems or, say like a relationship problem, a relationship with your kids, a job, all of that, everything bleeds. Right? Our trauma bleeds. And when we've got a chaotic and a really emotional situation, say, for example, like physical abuse in the home, and the Lutzes allegedly was a really great example of that, we start to realize that, that energy just doesn't stay within us. That's something that becomes a lot broader. And we start to tune into things like, maybe like a negative entity or something like that. So there was a lot of people that experienced things in the house. Many of you will know that Ed and Lorraine Warren were involved in the case for a short amount of time as well. And what was interesting about that in particular was the testimony from some of the photographers that came the investigators that came in to document the case. And a lot of the photographers that were actually asked to come in and photograph the phenomenon were freelance journalists who had gone to war. They had gone to war, they'd gone overseas, photographed battles and all sorts of things. And there was a number of them that actually turned around and quit after Amityville. That was it. They said they would rather go back to battle. So they were quite frightened by what they experienced as well. So there was plenty of testimony, despite the idea that everything was a hoax and things like that. Despite all of that, there was plenty of testimony to suggest that something was going on as well. So it's really interesting. And no matter what side of the spectrum you fall on, I think this is a good case to look at in terms of understanding how we really end up, getting back a direct reflection of exactly who we are, what we're doing, and where our mental state is. We really do. And in order to deal with that when it comes to hauntings or anything like that, we have to be able to take a look at us rather than be, focusing on the phenomenon specifically and expecting it to just go away. It doesn't work like that. We got to go inwards, and we got to see the relationship between what we're doing and how it's affecting the reality that we're getting back. And so we've been talking about this a lot in spiritual healthcare, because I think right now, especially with the pandemic and all of this going on, that is so important. We have been, we've been isolated. We are left with our thoughts. We've been left with, all of those things that maybe we kind of wanted to bury because we don't want to deal with it, so we'd go to work or we'd make ourselves busy doing something. And now with the pandemic, of course, we all have to stay home, and we're forced back into a lot of the situations that, maybe might have been toxic or are just toxic emotional states that we now have to sit and process and deal with. And so it's people that are experiencing, hauntings. Of course, more stuff is coming up about that. We've got, and unfortunately, even people who are, stuck in abusive situations and things, it's becoming a large issue. So I think this is a really, really great, subject matter to get going with, and I'd like to do this with another case tomorrow, because I think these are great teaching tools. Arnold, thank you for your question about this, because I think this is Amityville is something to definitely, we look at and we can break it down, and I'd like to do another case tomorrow, and take a look at what we can learn from that as well, because there is so much that these past incidents and famous cases that, of course, all of us have seen on TV or whatever, can teach us about how the universe mirrors back whatever emotional state we're in, and I think it's really important. So, that being said, Arnold has another question. He says, could it be a poltergeist that created Ronnie DeFeo's mental state? Poltergeist activity is actually different. Poltergeist activity is usually caused by an individual, so that's not something that's like an external entity. Usually poltergeist activity begins from us. Is known like as psychokinesis or PK. So I don't believe Ronald DeFeo or that family specifically reported a haunting necessarily. They didn't go into any detail about that, at least from what I understand. So I wanted to give you guys a process today that I think you guys will find really helpful. I find this really cool because my best friend Patricia and I have been doing this recently, and I love this so much. So it's really easy to get stuck when we're journaling and we're playing around and talking about things that we want to change or that kind of thing. It's easy to fall into that. What do we want to change? But have you taken stock of what it is that you've done really well? What have you succeeded in? What miracles have happened for you? What's happened for you? What's going on already? So often we actually start to we stop taking note of all the things that are going so right and things that have kind of blown our minds. I mean, we've all had those moments where we're looking around and we realize, this should not have happened. This is amazing. You're feeling really, excited or blessed or happy or, something's gone on where the odds have just all lined up in your favor. And we forget to note those sometimes. We kind of shove them in the closet, and we go back to trying to figure out what we want different or what we want to fake or fix or whatever. So for those of you guys who are doing the journaling work, and if you're not, then this is a great place to start, is to start creating a log of successes. Start to document what it is that you have been really successful in doing. What has really worked out against all odds? Can you write that down? This is an amazing reference point, because when we're trying to do things like, look forward, especially in a situation like, COVID-19, where, we're all, sort of living moment to moment a little bit. This is such a great way of being able to realize that you've had stuff work out. And you're probably going to find, as you're writing this list down, that there's going to be more and more and more and more come out, and you're going to go, oh my God. Next thing you know, you're going to have a list of all of these things, and you're probably going to find that there is more in there than what you expected. So give it a try. Start your log of successes, and just start wherever you are. You can go to the past. Start thinking about things you've done maybe as a kid, in your job, with your family, all of those things, and start looking at that, because man, it's amazing what you guys are going to come out with. So start that. Now, to add to all of that, I've got a really great to-do for you guys, that you guys can actually do weekly, because this is really awesome, and they're available online also. So for those of you guys who have the OWN network, so OWN, or of course you guys have access to YouTube and things like that, I wanted to introduce you guys to a great show and a great channel called Super Soul Sunday. Okay, Super Soul Sunday. And every Sunday, it's an hour show where you can you can tune in, and the lovely Miss Oprah Winfrey interviews some of the best teachers, masters, creators of our time right now. People like Michael Bernard Beckwith, Iyanla Vanzant, who we've been reading, also just some absolutely incredible people. Brene Brown, for those of you guys who don't know Brene Brown, she was the, she researched vulnerability. She had a TED Talk, which ended up going viral. It's an incredible TED Talk. So there's all of these incredible people. Gary Zukav is another one who wrote Seed of the Soul. Eckhart Tolle, who we've been reading from as well. All of these people, and for an hour you get to sit and listen to them talk about their experiences, how they're doing things. And I highly, highly recommend it. It's really, really, really good show. And it's available online as well. So Super Soul Sunday, I will put a link to it on Entity Seeker, the Facebook page here, so you guys can check it out. It's going to be really cool. So Arnold wants to know what the subject is for tomorrow. Tomorrow, I think what we're going to do, I know you guys have been throwing out the entity case. I think that's a great idea. I'd love to go into that. Let's break down the entity case and talk about what we can draw and learn from that as well, because that's a big one. A very good friend of mine was actually the lead investigator on that case, Dr. Barry Taff, and he's just absolutely incredible. So we will delve into that and talk about what this looks like on the level that we're now understanding things. The entity was a book, you guys, that came out in a film as well. Frank DiFolita was the one who wrote the entity book, but as I say, a very good friend of mine was the lead investigator on that, and it's very interesting. So we'll delve into that a little bit tomorrow. Keep your questions coming though as well. I like to always mix it up and add stuff in too. So please, please keep throwing that stuff in, because it's awesome. So I've got a reading for us this afternoon, which is, I think, not only relevant, but it's real good. It's real good. So we're going back to Faith in the Valley, from Iyanla Vanzant, which is so awesome. I can't say enough about this book, and I want to read this to you guys. I hope you guys can take something away from it, because I think it's pretty relevant. In the middle of panic, crisis, or confusion, it can be difficult to listen to what is said and not what you hear. Even the slightest emotional upheaval will not only cloud your vision, it will also clog your ears. When we're upset, we hear with fear. We hear with our broken hearts, our shattered egos, and our anger. At times like this, harmless little words take on great big meanings, and the smallest, most innocent gestures become life-threatening movements. You might feel like you're being attacked when you're actually being consoled. You might think you're being criticized when you're actually being supported. If you don't know you're upset or feeling vulnerable, ask people what they're saying before you jump to a conclusion about what they have said. So I love this in relation to kind of what we're talking about, because we do tend to hear through our own filters, and we see through our own filters. And this is partially what I mean about, as I say, cases like the Amityville, right? Where, when we've got people that we come into a space with our filters on. We just do. We have a way of looking and being at the world and being in the world. And it's really hard sometimes to turn those filters off. So if we're in a position where we are typically spending that time in a dysfunctional place or an angry place or upset or, super sensitive to what's happening, we start to hear through a filter or see through a filter and start to create our reality from that space going forward. So it's something we have to be really, really conscious of and careful about. Now, that being said, we got to do our health affirmations before we go. So everybody take a breath. It is natural for my body to be well. Even if I don't know what to do in order to get better, my body does. I have trillions of cells with individual consciousness, and they know how to achieve individual balance. When this condition began, I didn't know what I know now. I don't need to understand the cause of this illness. I only have to gently, eventually release this illness. It doesn't matter how it got started, because it's reversing its course right now. There's no hurry about any of this. My body knows what to do. Well-being is natural to me. My inner being is intricately aware of my physical body. My cells are asking for what they need in order to thrive, and Source is answering those requests. I am in very good hands. My only work is to relax and breathe, and I can do that easily. Everybody take a breath. Thank you guys for another awesome morning of spiritual health care. I love coming together with you guys every day and talking about this stuff. Please keep your questions coming in. Email me, tweet me, text me, whatever you've got going, whatever is the easiest for you. And as I say, we're gonna be intermingling questions, and I keep a long list of them. So everything you guys asked, I'm trying to answer as much as I can, and because your questions are fantastic, so please don't stop. This is fantastic, and is such a great way to spend my mornings. I know you guys are having so much fun, and I believe me when I say this is as much fun for me as it is as well. So Shadow wants to know if I can make a clip of the health affirmations so you can download it. Yes, absolutely, I totally can. I will figure out how to put that onto entityseeker.ca for you guys, or some variations of them or something like that. Totally. And yeah, thank you guys again so much. If you guys are catching up on past classes or anything like that, please, you can find all of them on youtube.com/entityseeker or entityseeker.ca. All the videos are in the video section. So you guys can go there and check it out. And don't forget, this Saturday, if you live in America and you get the Travel Channel, don't forget this Saturday, Paranormal 911, the debut of Season 2 on the Travel Channel. Canada has had it for a while now, and it's awesome. I've always just, it's such a pleasure to be on that show. It's got lots of great takes on stuff and information and all sorts of stuff, and different opinions on cases and whatever. So Travel Channel, guys, this Saturday. I think it's gonna be pretty fun. As I say, Canada kind of got a sneak peek. We got it the same day that Haunted Hospital Season 2 aired. So yeah, so if you've got Travel Channel, catch it. So, all right, I'll see you guys right back here tomorrow, 10 a.m. Mountain Time on Spiritual Health Care. Bye, everybody.